And joining us on Zoom today is Senator Fatima Payman. Senator, lovely to chat to you. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Isaac. How you going?
Oh, look, can't complain. There's a fair bit to get to today, and listeners, if you've got any questions for the Senator, we can put them to at a different time, but send them through TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Youth Jam online. Senator, I want to start with my biggest bugbear, and I'm sure you'll share this with me, actually. Despite how important the youth vote is, it feels like major parties have never been so out of touch with young people and have never felt so ignorant to what young people need and want. What's your take on that?
Look, they've had it too good for too long in terms of making it sound like they care, but in reality have no idea how tough young people are doing it on the ground. It's devastating to recently see how they've been positioning their housing policies to try to win the young voters over. And if it sounds very sexy in the beginning. You're like, yes. Oh, wow, 5% deposit. That's awesome. But that's 95% loan on properties that on average, whether you're here in WA or in the East Coast, like it's in the range of 800,000 to 1.6 million. Taking out a 95% loan on that is ridiculous because you're paying a monthly mortgage of $4,500 to up to $9,000. Like without addressing the root cause of these problems, it's Band-Aid solutions. And we're sick and tired of it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I spoke to a housing expert only 2 days ago who said to me that Labor's pledge is only going to keep us a status quo. It's not going to improve anything in 4 or 5 years. And then the Coalition's pledge, well, that got a bit of a scathing review from that housing expert saying that it will actually lift housing prices and it will not help housing affordability at all. I am curious, though, why don't you think these parties are going further? Because the youth vote is clearly important. Everyone's talking about it. But why aren't they going far enough to actually capture that vote?
Look, it's 50% of voters in this election are going to be millennials and Gen Z crew. And so we can't keep turning a blind eye and expecting a different outcome when it comes to voters, like seeing right through the political jargon. I think the major parties, firstly, don't have representation when it comes to young people. I mean, the average year of birth of a Labor senator is 1969.
Right.
Like that's honestly the year of the moon landing. So yes. To then try to even, using words like the opposition has no, they're delulu and have no salulu is not going to make the Prime Minister popular with young people. Okay, like that was next level cringe. Like I'm known as Skibbity Senator,
yes,
but even I found it cringe. I was like, mate, you're trying too hard. Absolutely, way too hard. But that's because there's no representation. It's just a box ticking exercise when it comes to young people. They just, want to be seen to be doing something, but in fact, like, the demands that young people have been putting forward, whether it's on the front of climate action, whether it's housing affordability, whether it's mental health support, or simply, just trying to make ends meet. Young people shouldn't be cornered to make decisions like whether they can afford their next meal or have to pay for rent. And everywhere they turn, it just feels like the major parties are only there to line their own pockets with lots of cash. In fact, after leaving the Labor Party, I've been not only thrust into the world of independently looking at every single policy that comes to my desk, but I came across this resettlement allowance that basically pays defeated MPs $120,000 for being kicked out, for literally doing such a shitty job as an MP that your local representatives are like, get out of here, mate. And they get this fat paycheck. Like, it's bizarre. And when I asked and put an amendment forward, to get rid of the $120,000 plus the 3 return flights to Canberra, the Labor Party, the Liberals, and Pauline Hanson's One Nation were like, nah, we're going to keep it. And it's like, you bang on about the cost of living crisis, and yet when you can actually save money by not rewarding yourselves for losing your seats, it would be great for that to be diverted and actually aid and help assist people on the ground, especially our young people.
That's a lot of money. It's nothing to sneeze at. 120 grand, and that's just for one MP. That's a lot of money. That could do wonders for people.
That's not even your average punter out there. Their average salary isn't even that much. You know, people are really doing it tough, and I think politicians need to lead by actions, not just empty words, throw it here and there, add photos with young people on their social media and think, that's it, we've ticked a box. That should, please young people. It's like, no, there's more to it. Like, stop treating us like we're dumb.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to my next point, and I want to come to your policy announcement shortly. But before we get to that, youth media is really important, particularly independent youth media like Youth Jam, like the Daily Oz, all those kind of places. We've asked multiple politicians, particularly Albo and Mr Dutton, to come on our programs and have a chat. No luck at all. Even the Daily Australia, the Daily Oz, they're battling to speak to Peter Dutton. From your perspective and your context, having been a part of Labor for a wee bit, why won't these guys come and speak to groups like Youth Jam and the Daily Oz, who are just trying to speak to these people on behalf of young people?
Because they've got their priorities all messed up. They just don't know that it actually makes a huge difference for young people's voices to be elevated, for their questions to be answered, and perhaps they may be too scared, because we're going to be asking on action on climate change. We're going to be asking what they're doing specifically to aid housing affordability and homelessness. We will be specifically asking for young people for their youth allowance to match all the expenditure and expenses that they've had to cop up. So it's like, these tough questions need to be answered, and I think they've got the Labor Party have a youth minister, but it's like, what do you really do? How are you delivering for young people? Just having an advisory body that meets a few times a year isn't good enough. Like, we need to see, when the budget comes out, we need to see proper, measured and ongoing commitment to young people's demands, not just a Band-Aid solution, like I said. In fact, there was an event yesterday that both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party representatives and ministers, over 15 representatives were contacted, but nobody showed up. And I mean, this was an insightful panel, and it was called Youth on the Mic, where basically young people would share their stories from various organizations and they would pose a question. So it was just me and a Green senator that was present. But that's not good enough. Like, if we want to have an all-in approach, if we want to be serious about taking action on the demands of young people, like, we need to be at the table and we need to hear from them, not just appoint a so-called body, and that body doesn't really speak for all young people.
I want to come to your career now and your policies, because you've had quite a ride. After crossing the floor, after quitting the Labor Party, you formed your own party, Australia's Voice. Before we come to the policy, can you tell us a bit about what you're hoping to bring to Parliament for Australia's Voice?
Thanks, Isaac. Look, Australia's Voice is fairly young. We're 4 months young. It has been quite a roller coaster ride, but nonetheless, the party's come into inception after hearing from various Australians around the country saying that feeling disenfranchised, feeling disillusioned, feeling like their voices have been drowned all this time. Nobody's taking them seriously. You know, the middle forgotten Australia, who want bold changes, who want politicians to have the courage to speak their truth, to be able to unapologetically stand for Australians and put their priorities first, not the interests of big corporations and massive mining lobbies and companies. So it's wonderful to be able to be that, to give people that chance of voting for someone that's different, like an alternative, a real alternative that's willing to fight tooth and nail, and do what it takes. And I think already I've demonstrated through my engagement, whether it's through amendments on a legislative platform within the Senate, or whether it's introducing bills like the Genocide Red Lines Bill package, which basically says Australians' taxpayer money shouldn't be funding a genocide. Like, we need transparency, we need integrity. And it's wonderful to see the response. Like, I'm absolutely overwhelmed. It's been incredible, whether it's your 16-year-olds wanting to join, or whether it's the seniors who want to see the two major party duopoly just absolutely broken down, because they've had it too good for too long. And this is our one opportunity. Again, knowing that we're a minor party with minor resources, and being realistic with what we see ourselves achieving this election, we also want to emphasize on the vision we have, whether it's running in state elections post May 2025, all the way to working really hard towards the federal 2028 election. And we want to not just talk the talk, but walk the talk, and put a lot of emphasis on representation, and making sure that when we do talk about young people's challenges and issues that are an absolute priority to them, that we have representation. And I'm proud to say that Imani Darwish, who is our New South Wales candidate, she is in her 20s, and perhaps the youngest Senate candidate.
Wow.
That's running in this election. So it's wonderful to be able to have her on our team, to hear firsthand what the challenges are and how we can tackle it. But at the same time, just a point of clarification that Australia's Voices running candidates just in the Senate,
yes,
around the country in all mainland states. So WA, South Australia, Queensland, Victoria and New South Wales. So lots to do. But I know that when it comes to leadership, it's been done the wrong way. It's always had the current politicians do a top-down approach where they tell people on the ground how things should run. Whereas as we're formulating our party platform and pushing for change, we have a bottom-up approach where we are encouraging people on the ground who are facing these hardships to come tell us how can we elevate their voices? How can we bring practical, tangible change that will alleviate the pressures of you now, not in 10, 20, 30 years,
yes,
but how can we get that immediate relief now?
Yes, yeah. You've touched on something that I get very passionate about, and that's interim measures. I'll come to that in a minute if I get time. One of your announcements or your policies is to raise the tax-free threshold to the minimum wage. Can you take us through that pledge?
100%. Look, we announced it 2 days ago, and we believe that those who are earning minimum wage, the bare minimum that you need to get by, you shouldn't be taxed on it. And I think it's roughly around $48,000. What we're seeing at the moment is we are taxing people into poverty and then wondering, why is their living standards not up to scratch? Like, why are people struggling, and why are they having to live in their cars? So that's one of our bigger ones, where essentially by not taxing people who are at minimum wage, they'll be saving about $6,000 a year.
Wow.
Now that's a lot of money that could actually go towards all the other expenses that we're seeing, and the cost of living crisis is just gripping Australians, and especially young people. Like, you can't really think about your future when you're trying to make you're struggling to make ends meet right now, having to work multiple jobs around the clock. And yeah, it's just bizarre.
I am curious though, and this is the question that comes from a genuine place, and a lot of people ask, minor parties always, make promises, and some people have the mentality that they won't be able to keep these. So I have two questions for you. How will you make this happen? And do you worry that making deals with the governing party or whoever it may be will change that policy potentially in a negative way?
So, should Australia's voice hold the balance of power in the Senate? And a lot of negotiations do take place in the Senate.
Absolutely.
But it is a very straightforward ask. And in terms of how we would be able to pay for it, if, teachers pay more tax than gas giants, like if we can have massive tax breaks given to gas giants and big corporations, then I'm sure we can fork out money as a government to be able to provide for this. But at the same time, we've got other ridiculous bills or agreements and commitments like the AUKUS deal, right? Like $368 billion and counting. So I'm sure that the government would be able to find money for that. But there are many ways that they could look at making that happen. And I don't think that I would take no for an answer at all.
I can see that, Senator. Yes.
I've been in a situation, and this is a little bit of a story, so feel free to, if you want to cut it out later. No. But essentially, when I had to go at Pauline Hanson that day of last year,
I saw that. Yes,
SmackDown. It was amazing. But we had Lydia Thorpe. She got suspended, so the government needed my vote the next day. And there's something called a guillotine motion, where essentially the government tries to put 40, they were trying to put 40 bills to the Senate without debate, right, and they wanted it to be voted. So the Prime Minister called me in, since 4th of July was the first time his office called us in. So it was me and my chief of staff. And the Prime Minister basically was trying to use the 2 additional staff to get me to say yes to the full 40 bills that would be put in a guillotine. And I was like, look, I've managed to survive the past few months without those 2 additional staff. It's tough work. It's a lot of long hours.
Yeah.
But we can definitely make it work. If you do want my vote, how about you get rid of the 3 migration amendment bills? The 3 bills that we're essentially going to put real refugees and asylum seekers who are in Australia seeking protection, they would be then deported at the discretion of the minister. They could be deported to a third country where their human rights may not be guaranteed. So I was like, we have heard from the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre and all these other peak bodies who are saying that this is going to have detrimental impacts on thousands of refugees and people on bridging visas. And the Prime Minister was like, no, it's not. We've got to deal with the coalition. So, whether you support it or not, it's going to go ahead. And I was like, you're the Prime Minister. You can get rid of those 3 bills and you have my support. That's the deal. And he was like, no, I can't do that. And I was like, fine, no deal from me. And as I walked out, the Prime Minister looks at my chief of staff and goes, you're the adult in the room. Go convince her.
Oh,
I know.
Jesus.
Bizarre. Like, I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, if I didn't have that principled stance, if I was so easy to just negotiate on matters that, on little personal wins, I would have probably just bent over backwards. But I was like, no, that's not what we want. There are genuine lives at risk here. So basically, to answer your question, I will not be compromising on my values and principles and what Australians ask of me. So should the opportunity come where I'm negotiating with the government on raising the tax-free threshold to minimum wage, I will stand firm because, hey, let's face it, they can put a new top tax bracket. You know, it was similar to what the Liberals had back in the Menzies era. Or, you know, when it comes to economics, we should sort of see it as a space where we can be innovative and bring new solutions rather than doing the same old thing again and again and trying to expect a different outcome.
You know, that comment by the Prime Minister, I'm still stuck there, Senator, with due respect, I'm still stuck there. That reminds me, and I know it's completely different, but also similar in some way. It reminds me, and it's very personal to me, with someone with tick disorder. He walked into the Parliament, he did all his stuff, and he was arguing, and he called out Angus Taylor, and he made a Tourette's slur. I mean, I don't know about this Prime Minister's language and the way that he speaks. It just, I mean, as someone with tick disorder, that made me quite disheartened, and it made me think, I'm not voting Labor. But I'm stuck on that, Senator, because that is just so disrespectful.
Yeah, it is. It's you know, he sees me as a little girl. He doesn't even see me as an equal, you know, a senator who's trying to represent her state. Like, yeah, it is. But I wasn't surprised if, you know, because I've been through so much.
Yeah.
Having had crossed the floor on a matter of principle, and then literally just the punch on basically that we had. And even till the other day, you know, like the Prime Minister is just either so threatened by my presence and the movement that I've created that he's constantly thinking about me. I mean, you know, in Parliament House, he just has a go, and I'm like, bro, I wasn't even doing anything. Like, leave me alone.
I'm just sitting here enjoying your shenanigans. Oh my God.
Gee, but it just shows that he's threatened by young people. I mean, the fact that they rushed to do the social media ban for under 16-year-olds.
Oh, don't get me started.
24 bloody hours was all Australians had to consult and put submissions in.
And don't forget, they also did the Senate debate so late at night that anyone interested in that age bracket would have probably been in bed to go to school the next day. I mean, it was just the definition of stupidity.
That's it. You've nailed it. That's the word.
I should be a politician.
You should. Isaac.
Oh my God. But I have one more question for you though. And I saw this on your Facebook page, and I thought, I might ask the senator this. Someone asked about your policies, and they also asked you what some of the policies of the major parties that you like. Are there any policies that Labor and maybe the Liberals have come out with that you like the sound of?
Not really. Look, there is the Commonwealth Prac payments, right? But I reckon, so hear me out. I reckon when it comes to the Commonwealth Prac payments, that we need to increase it to minimum wage, right? Just like how we want no tax for those on minimum wage.
Yes.
We also want those Prac payments to increase. But what we also want as Australia's voice is to increase the amount students can earn before their youth allowance or their Oz studies reduced. I've been hearing firsthand from students saying, look, I'm trying to pick up two jobs or 3 casual jobs on the side to try to pay my weekly $700 rent, or try to pay all the expenses of my car, try to just literally keep up with my bills. And the moment I do that, my youth allowance is impacted, and that youth allowance is what, $330 per week.
It's not much.
Like, it's not. It's peanuts. If you're paying $700 a week for rent, how do you expect to survive on $330 per week? So it's like, why aren't we, when we do come up with like Commonwealth prac payments pracs should be paid, all these placements should be paid, then yeah, great. How about you increase that to match the minimum wage to make sure that, if that's the bare minimum, literally the definition of minimum wages, that's the bare minimum you need to be able to live and get by. That's something that we're definitely going to push for real hard, to increase the amounts that students can earn before their youth allowance and Aus studies impacted and reduced, to ensure that when it comes to Commonwealth prac payments, they're increased to minimum wage, making sure that we're reversing the social media ban.
Yes, amen.
Introducing a Bill of Rights to make sure everyone's rights are protected.
Yep.
What else was there? Oh, expanding mental health services.
That's important.
I've done 12 towns in 12 days around WA, and you have no idea how our regions are impacted.
Have you been to Karratha?
Drastically.
Oh, I mean, their mental health system is a state. It's a mess. And they have been promised for about 10, 15 years this step up, step down facility. And they said, oh, it's going to be built. It's going to be built. They finally, after media pressure from myself in the West, they finally come and said, yep, okay, we'll build it. But they're building it with a lack of beds. There's only a few beds in there, not enough to cater for the growing issues in the area. But the issue I have is, and you mentioned it earlier, is the fact that we don't invest in measures for the interim. What do we do whilst this facility is being built? Because Karratha Health Campus, funnily enough, aren't taking mental health patients or aren't taking them to the full degree they should be. So what do you do in the interim?
It's short-termism. These politicians and the major parties, all they think about is, how do I get re-elected? That's it. They don't think about what's best for the nation, what's best for facilities like this, and how can we actually alleviate the problems, rather than just saying, here's a Band-Aid solution. I don't know if this is going to work, if this can be, transitioned into a long-term solution. But so what? Maybe I'm going to be in, or maybe I'm not. Then it's going to be the next government's problem. And it's like, can we start thinking of sustainable long-term solutions when it comes to problems and issues on the ground? Because I think an estimated amount of like $500 million per annum needs to be spent on mental health just for early prevention, let alone crisis support, let alone when it comes to suicide prevention. Like, there's just so much that needs to be done. I mean, telehealth was great during COVID.
Yes.
But even then, like when it came to the mental health care plans, from 20, they were brought back down to 10. And it's like, if you didn't know, we've got a lot of crises taking place, cost of living, housing, climate, like mental health is literally deprioritized. It is not something that politicians are putting money where their mouth is. You can't just throw it around without having tangible solutions. And like you said, that interim solution or proposition before you reach the so-called commitment. Because even in the situation with Karratha, I feel like something's going to happen, or there's going to be a change in government, and it's just going to be stalled.
Yeah, like a lot of projects are. It happens all the time, and it's just so upsetting for the regions, because they give us so much and we barely give them anything in return. But Senator, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us on the Newsflash podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Isaac. All the very best.